Welcome to Restaurant Deal Making Exposed, the only show that equips you with everything you need to know about restaurant transactions. In this show, we tell you all about how to make the sale or purchase of your restaurant not just possible, but successful. Now here are your hosts, ex-restaurateurs and seasoned brokers, Patrick Toda and Andy Mirabel.
Okay, welcome back to another episode of Restaurant Deal Making Exposed. I'm Andy, I'm here with my partner Patrick, and today we have an episode called Leave It to the Pros. Why every restaurant needs a specialized attorney and CPA or bookkeeper. Today we're tackling a topic that is often overlooked, but absolutely critical. Why every restaurant needs a specialized attorney and specialized bookkeeper and or CPA. From lease negotiations to tax implications to keeping your business in legal compliance, you, the owner, should focus on the business's day-to-day and consistency within it, and leave many of these other nuanced and complicated responsibilities and requirements of running a successful business to specialized pros. We feel adamant to share our opinion and information with you, given we are also specialized in what we do as restaurant brokers. Would you call Patrick or I to help you buy a medical facility? No. Likewise, we want all of our clients to understand that they should source specialized professionals for overseeing many complex aspects of business operations and or a pending business sale or purchase. Having professionals in your ring isn't just helpful, it's essential. Save yourself a headache and leave it to the pros. So there you go, Patrick. That's my soft pitch to you here. Why are we using pros?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. And I on this podcast, I've tried to speak from my own personal experience. And I definitely had a really bad experience not using the right accountant right off the bat with my first business. And it was terrible to correct it doesn't just happen overnight to correct. You have to go through a whole process of transitioning to another accountant. They have to do a bunch of cleaning up. I never wished that upon anybody, and I hated that experience for myself. So yeah, I think it's really, really important to, and if we can start talking immediately about like an accountant or bookkeeper.
One thing to chime in there, and I agree with you. I've had my own experiences too, why it's been so beneficial to use a restaurant-specific bookkeeper, accountant, or CPA. One, I'll be honest, we've had Don Engel from Engel Accounting on multiple times. He was integral from my 20s to really let me and help me and grow and understand the books of restaurants. I thought I did. But guess what? To all the little nuances and what to do, not to do, I really learned a lot from him. Likewise, I have had clients, and I've experienced it too with myself in my first restaurant too, but I've had a lot of clients that had terrible books. And they're like, well, I don't know what to do about it. It's my bookkeeper, it's my accountant. The books make no sense. They're not consistent year to year. They're not restaurant-specific accounting. As we know, it's quite nuanced. And so it really has caused a lot of problems. And it causes clients confusion. It causes them to spend more time and energy and stress on these things if they don't have the right people doing their books or helping them with legal aspects of their business, right?
Yeah, and the other thing is timely, and I have a very specific experience because I worked for Starbucks, and so that's, during that time I was given really good reporting in a very timely manner, and I was able to really focus in on my business and managing it and having the right reports to do so. So when I started my business, and I had an accountant and they weren't able to provide that for me, I got really frustrated and impatient, and it wasn't good enough because I know what it can be. And obviously I don't have, as a small business, the resources of a Starbucks, but what I had at that point was terrible. And I was like, well, how am I going to manage this really awesome operation with no reporting? You can't do anything timely. Like, what are my costs of goods? What's my labor cost? And not knowing that is a death sentence immediately.
Especially in restaurants. Things are moving so quickly. Cash flow in and out is huge, right? But you had the knowledge. You knew what the appropriate, correct books looked like. So knowledge was power there because you didn't spin your wheels for too long with a bad bookkeeper. And I've had clients that have had bad books for many years, and they just kind of stay with the status quo. Well, lo and behold, what happens when an audit comes along, right? The books aren't clean, and it's a headache, and it takes months, and they may owe a lot of taxes. Who knows? But if you have clean books and you're paying for a premium professional, maybe you're paying a little bit more every month for this, but it pays off in the end. I promise.
I have people that I have spoken to about selling businesses that don't get a profit and loss statement until they get their tax return done.
Exactly.
And that blows my mind. It's like, you don't even know. Yeah, longer, actually. Maybe,
Oh, you're right. You're right.
By October of one year for the, so you're talking about almost 2 years off. They have no reporting for their business other than like looking in their bank account.
Oh gosh. All right. You're getting me hot and bothered. I'm with you on that one. All right. Let's dive in. Do you want to tackle maybe legal?
Yeah. I mean, I was my restaurant was at Four Embarcadero. And so I had some really good lawyers right above me there. And so I learned really early on of having a very specific attorney, like a business attorney. I had a trademark issue. I had a trademark lawyer right above me. And I cannot tell you how important it is when you're doing a business purchase, a business sale, a lease negotiation, how important it is to have a business-minded attorney. Otherwise, they are going to reinvent the wheel, and you do not want that. I guarantee it.
Yeah, that's funny. You like made me remember a situation here very early on when I opened my restaurant school. I literally designed that logo from scratch, my fish skeleton logo and so on, and school with a K instead of a CH. And within year 2 and 3, we were doing really well, and we started getting notices that people were using very similar logos in other states. I didn't have much of a fight out of state, but there was a local Bay Area concept that said there was crossover and pushed our buttons. Guess what? We had all the trademarks, and we had the attorney write the clear firm letter, and they had to stop, not us.
I had a very famous chef in San Francisco show up to my door one day at my restaurant and asked to talk to me. And so we're talking, we're sitting at the table, and he's like, basically starting off soft and everything like this. And at some point he goes, I bet you're wondering what I'm doing here. I'm like, yeah, what's going on? And he's like, well, I started a business called Breaking Bread. And I was like, well, that's funny. That's the name of my business. He goes, I know. And that's why I'm here. I'm like, okay. He's like, not only did I start it, but I trademarked Breaking Bread. And I was like, wow, okay. He's like, so I want to learn if we can like have a mutual use of the name. And, I was like, okay, I'm not going to be emotional. I'm going to like tell him, hey, let me just think this through and I'll get back to you. So what did I do? I went upstairs, talked to my trademark attorney, and he said, Patrick, it doesn't matter if he has a trademark. He's like, you've been using the name since 2010. You're already open, and he hasn't even opened his business. So you're going to tell him to
pound sand.
Yep. And sure enough, I did that, and I told him you need to give up that name, and he did, and the rest is history. So, and that cost me like a minimal amount of money to just have that person who knew exactly what the story was.
Good. This is great. Those are 2 great examples. We've both been through it. So let's talk just in more day-to-day practical terms with an attorney. So attorneys that have worked with restaurants, they know the complexities and nuances, but what sort of specifics are we talking about here? Like an attorney can help us obviously with lease terms, negotiating, working with a landlord to get, a new lease drafted and so on. To have their eyes on it is vital, right?
Yeah. I mean, I have a lease negotiation going on right now, and the buyers, there's 3 of them. They were like, we're going to look over the lease. And I was like, do you guys have an attorney? They're like, no, we're just going to do it ourselves. I was like, I would highly advise you to have an attorney go through this, and give a red line, with their counterpoints. And they didn't even know what that meant. I was like, okay, so, it's our job to ensure that our clients are being looked after by the right attorney and someone who isn't going to like just go and rewrite the whole lease, right? But just
a facilitator, someone who's going to protect you from the bad, right? But also knows that you desire to enter into a lease in this location, right? I like that kind of approach from an attorney.
And some of it, is pointing out red flags or, even things that like won't be able to be negotiated, but making sure that the client understands what it means. I mean, even as something as simple as that, like, hey, this can't be changed. This is the way it's going to be, but you should know what it means. And having an attorney explain that to you is really, really important, right?
Yeah, we're, as a broker, obviously we look and review the lease in big detail for our clients, in great detail, right? And we're looking for the big red flags, recapture clauses of a space, shared consideration clauses, all these things that we can point out that, hey, these are restrictive clauses, Mr. or Mrs. buyer or seller, our client. But please do have your attorney go over this because they really can dig into it deeper and explain the risks in more detail, right? And offer legal suggestions.
Yep. And even with like, that's for like a full new lease review, right? But like, let's say we're doing an assignment, and assignments can be very simple. It could be like a 1-page, consent of an assignment between the seller and the buyer. And it could be very simple. However, if there's personal guarantees involved, there might need to be an indemnification, and you might need to have your attorney write that up. And so it can be simple or it can be a little bit more complicated. And having, again, the right attorney there to help you through that is going to be really important.
All right. And we've never had an attorney jump in on an assignment and made it too complicated, have we? No comment, right? Yeah. All right. Let's leave that comment behind. All right.
Maybe we'll bring one of our past guests on. And,
yes. We'll call Roberta or Jordan. Yes. So you and I were talking at the CAB conference recently that we went to, which is the California Association of Business Brokers. We talked about, redlining offers, negotiations, making comments on them. Where do we draw the line at what we can do and should do as a professional and what our duty is to our clients where we don't cross that line to be practicing law?
Yeah, I mean, we're, not allowed to write legal jargon, right? And so, I mean, when we're talking about counterpoints or, addendum points, it needs to be fairly straightforward language. We're not there to rewrite clauses, suggest new clauses. That has to come from an attorney. And we don't have a law degree and we're not to practice law. However, we're there to help facilitate the deal. And, we all have different hats, right?
Let me ask you this then, because we're working in a very specific lane with selling restaurants and bars, right? We have done hundreds of deals, collectively between you and I. And if you're working on a deal and a situation comes up, question comes up, or a desire of the buyer or seller that to, add something to a purchase agreement, and we look back at other deals that maybe we've had a very similar experience, can we say, hey, well, I had a similar situation in this transaction. This is what we used that satisfied buyer and seller, and give them that information so they can process it with their attorney on their own if they want to use something similar, adding a term or adding language to an addendum. What do you think on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's safe for us to say, hey, look, use our experience. Like, hey, I've seen attorneys in the past suggest, this sort of thing to solve this problem, right? But really, you can't advise them that this is the way they should go. They have to make that decision for themselves. And maybe it ends up saving them some money because they can just go to their attorney and say, hey, look, this is what the broker, suggested based on other attorneys. And so you don't have to spend the time to have the attorney write that language or, again,
I think
start
it's
from scratch.
Very, very well said. I want to be useful to my clients. So I don't want to just be like, oh, talk to your attorney. I don't like that approach either. Let's try to be useful. But then, of course, the true legal stuff the decision should be made between the attorney and the client. So great. All right. What next in legal? Anything else we need to tackle?
I think that's pretty good. I mean, the things that we mostly advise our clients is to have an attorney throughout the transaction, help if there's anything that you want as far as the purchase agreement, or if you're buying, depending how big or small the deal is, it could be a little different. Depending on how complex the deal is, it could be a little different. And then, lease is a major part, right? And then from ongoing, there's various different things that an attorney can help you out with. Like, I had a labor dispute. Obviously, I'm going to go to a labor attorney, and have, help with that. There could be some ADA issues,
compliance,
you may need a ADA minded attorney. So, there's an attorney for everything, right? And it's really important that you go to the right person. But yeah, there could be many different attorneys that you need throughout your time as a restaurant owner.
I think also on some of the smaller transactions that are more asset-based or Main Street businesses that we sell, there's a lot of parties that we work with that go, no, I'm not going to bring in my attorney. And we have to be vocal about that as brokers and remind them of the value and suggest that this is the smartest thing for them to do. We can't force their hand, but
hey,
we're going to remind them.
Let me ask you this. Let's say you're doing a $50,000 transaction, okay? Small on the bigger scale of what we do, right? Okay. So yeah, you don't want to spend too much money, but let's say that something went really wrong and that 50,000 could end up costing you a lot more in the long run, instead of you spending maybe $1,000 or $500 or whatever it might have been. So it's not really always about the size of the transaction. It's what your total risk or liability could potentially be if you get something really, really wrong.
Touche. All right. Yeah. Let's move on to accounting.
Pound foolish, I think they call that. Penny wise, pound foolish, right? That's
Yes,
the
exactly. Exactly. Thought you were hitting on me or something there. I don't know.
No.
Okay. Accounting. So why is an accountant or bookkeeper or especially a CPA, why is it vital that they also have worked with restaurant clients in the past? This is a really big deal. I'm going to bring up again that we've had Don Angle, who's very dear to me, and I've worked with him for, nearly 20 years on and off. And,
I think he should pay us for a little plug.
I think we should. I'm calling him after this. Yes. At lunch at minimum. Let's see. So yeah, he speaks the lingo. He knows what the best practices are for restaurants, and he knows how important it is as a restaurant bookkeeper to be providing information to his restaurant owners quickly so they can pivot and make adjustments, because we know how slim and how slim the margins are and how difficult it is to run restaurants day to day. A small mistake can really culminate over time quickly and cost you a lot of money if you don't know how to shift. Okay. So obviously clean, accurate, and consistent books are essential in this industry. We see a lot of different kinds of bookkeeping, and, some of them are a little hard to determine, hard to translate when we're trying to value businesses because they're not clean. And, I think one of the themes I, as a broker, have noticed is we have a lot of clients that we have dealt with in the past that, want to have their cake and they want to eat it too. They have their own creative accounting in order to mitigate or limit their tax liability. They do things like cash draws or run a lot of personal expenses through the business. And that may benefit them when they are owning the restaurant year to year. They're paying less taxes. They're filtering more things through the business, and it benefits their day to day. It does not benefit us when it comes time to sell the restaurant. It does not. Right? No.
And in fact, I think it's a serious red flag, because you really don't know what you're buying, right? And it's like, oh no, and if there's a buyer for that, they can do a deal direct, because I can't be privy to, some under the table type deal. And, I tell people all the time, like, hey, you've been, being creative, we'll use the word creative, all these years, and we're not going to sell your business based on what you say it potentially is making. We're going to sell it based on what you're reporting.
Yeah.
And
if we see losses on the tax return, then losses are losses. There are some, big add backs. We've talked about them a lot that we can do, but we can't be so creative on things that are not above board. So having
I would argue that there's, maybe this was a thing back in the 80s and beyond,
when cash was being taken in.
Yeah, I would say that this buyer is less and less. There aren't a lot of buyers for this kind of thing anymore, because everything's on the up and up these days. You know what I mean? And I just don't think that's a thing that some buyers want to get into.
Yeah. You made a comment when we were talking about some of the notes with this that I appreciated, is that, you want a bookkeeper and CPA that has already worked with several restaurants, because they can advise you on what the quote normal end quote is, right? If your past bookkeeper, for example, didn't work in restaurants and was using a particular, accounting style or structure, and then we go to the CPA and he goes, this is not kind of industry standard for restaurants. And you may be paying more taxes, or maybe there may be, negatives in how you've been doing it. So you want that set of eyes, those professional set of eyes on it that can advise you on how to do it better and how to do it right for your industry.
Yeah, I see so many different ways that people report tips. I see so many different ways that people report sales tax. I see, and in my opinion, I've seen a lot of wrong ways. And I'm like, I don't think that's the way you're supposed to do it based on my experience. But, there are ways to report for restaurants that may be a little different for other industries. But also, I think one of the most important factors is having a restaurant-minded accountant is they can advise you, as you said earlier, on what other restaurants are reporting for certain costs, like labor and cost of goods and other things, so that you're kind of hoping that can gain some knowledge from this person who does books for 100 restaurants or 20 restaurants, and so that what averages look like, which may help you.
A restaurant owner may be misguided on what tax credits or deductions you can have for your business. I may be out there spending every single bar and restaurant I go to, put my credit card on it, saying this is dining and entertainment, right? And put it on my P&L as such. That's gone. That's all but gone these days.
And then we have things like the restaurant, healthcare mandate in San Francisco or other counties. And so you have these surcharges that have to be managed. I would assume that other industries don't have that. There's the gross receipts tax. There's so many different things that, you want to make sure that you're, maybe not even just industry specific, but maybe even local specific, because, someone in, San Mateo doing accounting there doesn't have to deal with these like mandates, whereas like someone in San Francisco does. So,
Yeah. Compliance. I think compliance is a word that goes in both of our categories of having an industry specific professional for accounting and an industry specific attorney. Compliance. Yeah, I couldn't keep up with San Francisco compliance. It was mind bending, right? But, I think we're really pushing this home, why we need professionals in restaurants, bars, or, food driven businesses. Any other topics that we think we should add on accounting? I know we had noted that a CPA obviously is going to help you with proper price allocation if you're purchasing a restaurant. We deal with that in every one of our transactions. That's important.
I think it's really important. And it's funny because I feel like the allocation in my eyes is more of a strategy. And I feel like some accountants look at it as a strategy and some look at it as a very literal kind of thing. And, I would love to maybe one day get Dan back on and talk about that because the way I understand it is that, it's setting a depreciation schedule for the seller and it's how the buyer is recognizing either capital gain or capital loss or income gain or income loss. And so, the way you allocate can affect what your total net proceeds will be after, all of that.
And to that point, we are brokers. We can't give tax or financial advice. Okay. So when I say, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer and seller, can you please provide me with the allocation of purchase price on this transaction? We have to agree on it. Both parties have to agree on it. How would you like to break down the price allocation? And I often hear crickets, right? And so I can go, well, on a similar size deal, this is what another party chose to do, but that may not suit this transaction. So please go to your accountant or CPA and ask, right? So anyways, I don't want to be blunt, but don't be a dummy, people, right? Use professionals. We're professional brokers. We work in the restaurant lane in helping people buy and sell restaurants. And that's what we do. We're specialized in it. Likewise, restaurant attorneys, there's a lot of different, types of categories we can talk about, but a restaurant specific attorney is vital. A restaurant specific bookkeeper, accountant, or CPA is vital. It'll help you sleep better at night, right?
If you can sleep when you own a restaurant.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Patrick, we have strayed from the food bonus question, but I'm going to hit you with one today, okay?
All right.
Can you remind and share with our listeners what your cultural background is, your heritage?
I am Palestinian.
Great. I would like to know, what dish warms your heart? What is one of your favorite cultural dishes that you either ate at home or make at home or whatever?
My favorite dish probably is going to be, I won't say it in Arabic, but it's basically a sumac chicken. And so what it is it's, a chicken that's cooked with sumac and other spices. And there's onions that have been marinating in sumac and lemon juice. And
what is sumac?
It's a purpley kind of spice and it has like a citrusy kind of note to it. So you put that with like allspice and cumin and some other, spices. And so it's kind of a one pot dish. So you have like what you do is you layer it, you put bread at the bottom, like pita bread. You put the onions that you've kind of started, grilling sweating out on the stove, and you put that on top of the bread, and then you put, the brown chicken on top of that, and then you put it in the oven and let it cook. And so the bread gets kind of all like the chicken juice. And what I do after that is then I put it in I take the bread out and I put it in like a cast iron skillet and then reheat it so it gets kind of crunchy too.
Wow.
That's probably one of my favorite dishes.
I love that. Thank you for sharing. And you know what? We obviously live in a very diverse part of the country and so on. And we love cooking, for Thanksgiving, for example. We did total fusion last year. Like we went like Asian hybrid. It was amazing. And we had a great time. And what you just described could easily translate to a turkey dinner, right? With the stuffing and the
you could kind of
feels like that.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing and sparking some new ideas. All right, you guys. Just to be blunt, don't be a dummy. Use a pro. All right. Thank you so much for listening. Check us out next time for a new exciting top 5 list episode. Have a good day.
If you enjoyed today's show and don't want to worry about missing an episode, you can follow the show wherever you listen to your podcasts. And if you found today's episode interesting or useful, please share it with someone you think would benefit and consider leaving a rating and review.
Reviews help restaurant owners or buyers just like you discover this podcast and benefit from the important topics covered in the episodes. Your opinion matters to us as a listener, so feel free to leave topic suggestions and feedback for us, as we will use these to tailor the episodes to you and help you get the most out of listening.
Thank you all for listening to this week's episode of Restaurant Deal Making Exposed. If you're considering selling your business and would like a free consultation, reach out to Patrick and Andy at therestaurantsalesbroker.com or visit www.therestaurantsalesbroker.com to learn more.